Hey everyone, welcome to this wealthmanagement.com Fast Chat. For this edition, I'm joined by Marian Macindoe, the head of ESG Stewardship at Parnassus Investments. Marian, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, David.
Marian, I think advisors are pretty familiar with ESG investing at this point and screening portfolios for ESG criteria. But what is ESG stewardship and why should advisors care about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Being head of ESG stewardship and having dedicated my career, 18 years of my career, working in ESG, sitting at various seats of the table at issuers, investors. I think ESG, I can tell you ESG stewardship is very important and an incredibly important part of active ownership here at Parnassus. So what am I talking about? What's ESG stewardship? Stewardship means that we at Parnassus use the rights of our ownership and our position of ownership to influence the companies in which we invest. And why do we do this? We do this in alignment with our principles, which are public on our website, and importantly, to protect shareholder value and to promote shareholder value. The heart of this thinking is if you're a company and you don't take care of the natural and human capital on which your business relies, you will not be successful in the long term. So I'll just provide a little bit of context about how Parnassus works and then how stewardship is an important part of what we do here. So at Parnassus, we have 5 funds. They're all active. And our research, and it's all ESG, right? So our research process is divided into 2 parts. One is pre-investment, and I think you mentioned exclusionary screens and screening for things. And another is post-investment. So pre-investment, we have a list of companies that don't meet our ESG criteria. And that's sectors that we don't want to invest in, basically, or industries we don't want to invest in. And some have been there since like 1984, gambling or weapons, or more recently, the addition of fossil fuels. And also some individual companies that maybe we don't have a problem with the industry itself, but we find that company wanting in terms of its ESG performance. So once companies make it through the screen and we decide we want to invest in them because we believe that they have a strong investment thesis, that's post-investment. We own the company. That's where stewardship comes in stage left. The work we do is once we own a company is to try to use tools that we have in our toolbox to help make those companies better and better able to deliver long-term value for clients. So I'll just walk you through those tools really quickly. One is engagement, right? So actually talking to the companies we own and asking them questions, particularly how are you identifying, prioritizing, and managing the ESG issues that really matter to your stakeholders and that matter to your business? And that's what engagement is. We talk to companies about issues that matter to them. We also use proxy voting, right? An important right for common shareholders is voting your proxies. So we thoughtfully vote those according to our policies and principles at every single annual and special meeting of all the companies we own. And the last tool is advocacy. And that's advocacy as in like talking to the companies we own on a market level, like going to conferences, webinars, and sharing our views and hoping that companies are able to listen and grow, sharing it with other investors and also at times with regulators. We just, the SEC has been pretty active on ESG, proposed rules on ESG. So we've been talking to the SEC as well.
So, Marie, can you describe Parnassus's engagement approach to affect change?
Yep, I sure can. And again, engagement is one of the most important tools that we have. And all of the engagement work we do is grounded in our company's mission, which is to build wealth responsibly for long-term investors. And we believe that companies best create value when they're widening the aperture of stakeholders that they consider. So our engagements can be event-driven, maybe something pops in the news feed or that comes to our attention that a company's having ESG issues or environmental and social problems. We want to talk, we want to learn more. We also have a set of engagements that are represent ongoing concerns of the company. So maybe the company's operating in an industry or in such a way that we have some questions or concerns and we want the company to do something differently. And we'll pick a small number of companies on narrowly tailored issues to affect change, with outcome-oriented engagements. And a last type of engagement is on proxy voting, which is, there's an issue to vote on a ballot, and we just want to get a little bit more information from the company before we make our voting decision.
Can you give us an example or two of some of these engagements and how they've affected change?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned last year we launched this program of deep, heavily researched, outcome-oriented engagements on very specific ESG issues. And oftentimes the ES and G are all wrapped up together. And our priority topics last year were environmental justice, algorithmic bias, climate risk, and workers' rights. So I'll give you an example on environmental justice. So I'll talk about two engagements on environmental justice. The first is waste management, and the second is Republic services. So probably the first question you have is, what is environmental justice? So as a baseline, environmental justice is about the disproportionate placement of high polluting facilities in communities of color or low income communities. And this is linked to higher rates of chronic health problems, disease, excess death, and environmental justice, because of these reasons, is in the crosshairs in lots of different jurisdictions for regulation or for litigation, certainly reputational risks, because everyone's got cell phones and human capital management as well. And in some cases, even license to operate can be taken away, the actual literal and figurative license to operate. And waste management and disposal is very vulnerable to this. So that just gives you a baseline of what we're talking about. So we engaged a handful of companies where we said, hey, we think this matters to you. We think this matters to your stakeholders. We think it matters to shareholder value. And what we asked as fiduciaries, as investors, we want you to take a look at your impact. Get a third party to look at your impact that your business has on its fence line communities. Look at your policies, look at your practices, and if you find an impact, fix it. That's what we were asking. And governance is front and center too, right? If you get governance right, everything else should fall into place. What's your policy? Tell us what it is. If you don't have a policy, okay, let's work together to figure out what that should be. So waste management, example one, very collaborative, very mutually beneficial outcome. The company became the first commercial services company to publish a tool that maps clean technology and pollution and community demographic data at the facility level. And this changed the conversation industry-wide and started building pressure on waste management's peers, or WM's peers, to act. So that we consider that a real win. Another company, Republic Services, similar topic. We didn't have the same response. They were hesitant to pursue the third-party review and the disclosures. And so we said, okay, we'll take it to shareholders and take the temperature of other folks who are invested in the company so we could all move forward with better information. And that's exactly what we got. So we put a shareholder resolution on the Republic Services ballot on this topic. It ended up getting 36% support, which is great. We got 58% support if you exclude affiliated shareholders, which forms a great basis for us continuing the conversation with Republic. And in both cases, we consider the engagements to have been successful and collaborative.
And unlocking shareholder value ultimately.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like when we're talking about ESG investing, the ESG screens are the first half of the equation. Stewardship is the second half of the equation. Where is it going in the future? As investor interest in ESG grows, and it clearly is, advisors more involved, where does the stewardship component come in the future?
Yeah, well, speaking for myself, what I see happening is the conversations are getting much more sophisticated as we continue to have them. Companies are starting to get it, right? They're starting to understand. They're starting to speak the language of ESG and ESG materiality. And the slide decks at issuers and at companies at conferences are starting to change from should we care about ESG to how should we manage ESG? So the conversations are graduating from disclosure-based conversations to actually how can we do better on this? And it's a great opportunity for investors to step in and help companies understand. And as we have dialogue. And I should emphasize here too, we're all on the same team, right? Companies and investors and advisors and analysts, we all want the same thing, which is long-term sustainable value. So I see growing partnerships. I see better conversations. I see growing partnerships, more enthusiasm, better performance. I do think there will be some bumps on the road. I do know that there's naysayers, and I know that there's going to be a lot of hurdles that we're going to have to overcome. But I think generally speaking, where we're moving is to an environment where people are starting to understand that if you don't take care of the natural and human capital on which your business relies, you won't be successful. Yeah,
that's great. And also gives advisors another discussion point with their clients, something to talk about, real conversations in the office. Marian, this has been great. Marian Macindoe, Head of ESG Stewardship at Parnassus Investments. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, David.